Amelia and her family were not nobles by any means, but they earned enough to live comfortably. Her family sold various fruits native to her family's land, among other things, so it was something to keep people in. It was not only Amelia's hard work ethic. Her beauty and warm personality attracted a wide range of customers. This included the eye of good King Alistair. King Alistair's reign had been a peaceful one since he was crowned 5 years prior, after the passing of his father, late King Ezra. And during Alistair's reign, he gained the respect and love of his people. On occasion, he would take walks when there weren't any duties to tend to. As the weather was nice on this day, the king was taking his time to enjoy it before any predicament were to happen, his blonde hair swaying some over his shoulders. Alistair was cutting through the market as a shortcut back to the castle. He was slowly pacing about, his eyes wandering at the various things sold and how bustling it was with every citizen walking by. Once King Alistair stepped foot out of the castle, he was treated like a regular civilian, and that is what he preferred. Royals do not get special treatment over in Ravet, and it's always been like that for as long as he can remember. It was taught to treat everyone with respect, regardless of social status. He continues walking, and he stops when he hears a woman laughing. Though the conversation itself couldn't be heard, Alistair watched with a slight smile as Amelia was helping a customer. She wore her hair down, light brown resting past her shoulders with vibrant curls, all while any sunlight coming in brightened her golden honey hues. She's beautiful, he thought. His stare lasted another second before he continued moving, this time making his way over to where Amelia was. As the other person leaves, Amelia looks over upon hearing footsteps approaching. The moment she noticed it was King Alistair, she gave him a smile, showing her nearly white teeth. Her smile seemed to give Alistair a small fluster in his stomach, returning the warm welcome. "Good morning, Your Majesty," Amelia spoke gently. "How can I help you?" As he heard her voice, he took note of her slight accent. Maybe one of her parents moved here from somewhere else. He didn't want to assume the place. "Good morning," he says, his eyes moving to the baskets of apples in front of him. "How fresh are these?" "Father picked everything before dawn. I hope they'll be to your liking." For Alistair, there were a few things on her stand even he hadn't seen before. This was also to say for the designs on the tapestries hanging up behind her. He decides to go with one of the red apples and proceeds to give her a few coins for it. Amelia puts the coins in a nearby drawer as Alistair takes a bite. He raised a brow, taken aback by the sweetness. "This is sweeter than I remember," he comments. "My family took some seats with them when they moved here from their home country over a century ago, Your Majesty," said Amelia. "This has been our way of living since. I have been able to live comfortably, so I cannot complain." "Please, address me simply as Alistair," he said, giving the woman a gentle smile once again. Amelia did the same, feeling her cheeks get a bit heated. She knew it wasn't from the smiling. "I'll make sure to keep that noted, Alistair." Hearing his name rolling off her tongue sounded like a little melody to him for the moment, causing him to chuckle some and his smile become wider. "Very good. And what would yours be?" "Amelia." "A very beautiful name for a woman as beautiful as a garden of roses." "Thank you. Will you be here tomorrow as well?" "Yes. Same time every day." "Excellent. I will see you then," he said. Alistair then took her hand gently into his, giving the back of it a peg, and with that, he was on his way back home. If she wasn't blushing already, now she was. "Oh wow, Amelia," a voice purred. Amelia looked over to see her younger sister bringing a few things in a crate. Jean figured Amelia was going to need more fruit to sell, and she was right when she noticed more than half the products were gone. Amelia jokingly tapped her arm when Jean set the crate down. Jean must have seen the last part of the conversation, and she must have assumed this had been going on for a while. "This is the first time he's been here. I don't know if he's coming back like he said." "There is one way to find out. I saw a glimpse of interest in his eyes. Why else would he touch your hand like that? What he did was something small. He must have his eyes on another woman." "Amelia, you know there is a one-spouse law here. That also applies to the royals." For a moment, that had slipped Amelia's mind. It was a law created in the last half century, and seeing the low crime rates as a result, it stayed. Being reminded of that did give Amelia some hope. You think it'll be worth it? I would if I were you. Our lives may end up getting a lot better. Maybe it will get Valentino to leave me be. Her and Valentino had been friends since they were children, yet only one began having feelings for the other. Amelia wasn't sure how to tell him, especially if other men are interested in taking her hand. If anything, Valentino was like an older brother to her. And if there is to be more with the King of Ravet, Amelia knows how much it will hurt him. Oh, he would not be too happy about a royal taking his lady, Jean jokes. He can't get angry when it comes to someone who isn't his, Amelia chuckled. That is very true. As the days come and go, with Amelia continuing to run the family stand in the town market, King Alistair kept his word to come stop by and chat. Slowly, their conversations were getting longer and more meaningful, and Amelia could see what her sister was speaking of with the small sparkles she would note when he looked at her. His eyes were as blue as the sky, so she could stare into them for hours. Soon enough, some months go by. The air got colder, and there were warmer things added for sale. That morning, the market wasn't as busy, which Amelia didn't mind. She found other things to do to not be completely bored. The sun was leaving behind the shades of orange and red as it rose. After the stand was stocked, Amelia would occasionally look off at the sunrise. This morning, it was between that and whatever books she would be reading. It was always a different one. And if she wanted to, she would have an entire library to read for hours if she wasn't doing her work. And in the moment, Amelia had her nose buried deep into her book to hear anyone coming. Good morning, Amelia. She jumps a bit in her stool, putting her hand over her pounding heart as she looked at who it was. She was good at making sure she didn't scream from fright, that's how distracted she was. When realizing it was King Alistair, Amelia breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Good morning, Alistair. I didn't mean to frighten you, my dear. As of recently, that new name stuck with the woman, getting her to smile a little more. It sounded good coming from him. It isn't your fault, Amelia reassured as she set her book down on her seat. It has been a slow morning. I hope it hasn't been too boring for you. Oh no, I know how to keep myself occupied. Their eyes locked, and Amelia is feeling butterflies in her stomach. Alistair has been kind to her, and she saw the sparkle of love when she looked into his eyes. Albeit it took time, and she could see how much he began to care about her. Amelia took a breath. How can I help you this morning? Amelia asked after the moment of silence. Before he could open his mouth to answer, the two heard Amelia's name called out a few feet away. Alistair held his hand near his sword, and he eased when Amelia went up to help an elderly man who had a heavy crate in front of him. He didn't see him at first, and only watched as he followed the woman. Why didn't you get Jean or Adam to help you, father? Amelia asked as she sat the crate down. You could have hurt yourself. I've been doing this since before you were born, my child. I will be fine, he said. The man had straight and thinning white hair reaching a length similar to Amelia's, with the beard going down just above his chest. Though he looked as though he could do things himself when seeing the slight muscle in his arms, yet with his age, Alistair can see why she would get concerned. The man then moved his gaze to the king, giving him a smile. It was a smile as welcoming and warm as the young woman's, with his teeth possessing a shade of yellow. Now I could see where she got that smile from, Alistair thought. And I wanted to see if it was true what Jean told me about your visitor, he continued. I didn't know it would be the king himself. You're doing a fantastic job running our country. Your father must be very proud. I'm sure he is with the Maker watching, sir. Thank you, said Alistair. Your daughter has been very kind to me. You have raised her well. It's difficult being a single father to 3 beautiful children. I am happy the Maker has allowed me to be well off, even after their dear mother passed on. My deepest condolences, Alistair said. And maybe since you are here, it may be more appropriate to ask you directly. Amelia felt her heart sinking to her stomach. Was this man about to really ask? Her father seemed to be taken aback like she was. But this is the king after all. Her father didn't want to say no to see what a royal would like of him. Of course, your majesty. What is it you would like? Alistair took a deep breath as Amelia held hers. I had been wondering for a long time if there was anyone already interested in her hand. Nobody for her as far as I'm aware, said her father. No, there is not, Amelia chimed in after finding a way to breathe again. She had a feeling for a while whether he was going to ask. Amelia felt in her chest that she is feeling the same to him as he is with her. She had no idea it would come on this day. Alistair looked at her, and this smile was the biggest she had seen on him, and soon she was now going to see many more of them. Then maybe later today I could send guards so she can come stay in the castle. I feel she will make a great queen. Amelia didn't realize she was smiling during the entire ordeal. It was every woman's dream to be with the king. She felt blessed by the gods this was happening to her. Her father sent her home, and Jean took notice of how big her sister's smile was as she was packing whatever belongings she could fit. Jean leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms and smirking. What's got you smiling like that, sister? Jean asked. Alistair asked for my hand. He's sending guards this afternoon. Oh my gods, I'm happy for you. I know. As there were a few hours till she had to leave, Amelia thought it best to go say goodbye to everyone. This includes telling Valentino, yet she was going to save him for last. After all, she needed time herself to properly word how she was going to break the news to him. And yet, she didn't have to tell him by the time she got to his home. How quick news travels in a short time in her area. After going around to the other marketers and family friends, Valentino's house was on her way back home when she knocked on the door. It was a simple brick home like all the others, painted white walls with a wooden door. With the Agostis, their door almost looked black for how dark the wood was. For reasons unrelated, it was rumored that Mr. Agosti had gone mad when the mother, Agatha, was said to be a witch and used a love potion to seduce him, which was why he was not in the picture. It was also said that Valentino himself was not right in the head, and a couple women he courted told he was controlling and short-tempered. Knowing him for most of her life and getting married to someone else, Amelia could test as far as with the short temper of his. Amelia wasn't too sure about the controlling aspect. From what Amelia could remember, it had only been Agatha and Valentino. She didn't want to believe such nonsense as she had grown up around them. At least, until she was proven the last one upon Agatha opening the door. Her hair was a dark gray and straight, and would be touching the ground if it weren't for her braids hanging over her shoulders and ending at her waist. She was dusting off her apron before laying eyes on Amelia, giving her a large smile the moment they made eye contact. "Hello, Amelia," Agatha exclaimed, letting her come in and closing the door behind her. "What a pleasant surprise. What brings you here?" "I wanted to have a moment with Valentino," Amelia said. "Is he here?" "He's in his room. Be careful when you go in, darling. He's been in a bad mood since coming home. Hasn't said a word to me to explain what happened." Amelia nodded in agreement. She's been in their home plenty of times to know where his bedroom would be, so Amelia was fine escorting herself. It was a small hallway. His door was the last one on the right. She took a moment to take a deep, quiet breath to calm her nerves before taking courage to knock on his door. Though this isn't the first time she's seen his temper, she was gonna find out the reason she wasn't expecting. It took a minute for Valentino to open the door partially, and from the red around his eyes she could tell he had been crying. For how long, she didn't know. Yet since they were friends, she felt her heart sinking with pity for the sight before her. "Oh my, Valley. You no longer have the right to call me that. What made you cry like that? Surely there's something You gave your heart to another when you knew of the love I have for you. You are more like a brother to me, Valentino, and you've known this. Maybe in another life we can have a chance. There is no second chance when we cannot have each other in this life." The more he spoke, the louder his voice was becoming. With his temper, it was a matter of time before things began to break. "Valentino, please." You are going to regret your decision, Amelia. I will make sure of it. She didn't wait to hear what else he had to say and quickly left after telling Agatha farewell. She knew with how he is, she made a good decision. As the days passed, Amelia was showered with royal jewels and dresses. It wasn't highly looked upon for a royal to marry a commoner, but again, Amelia's family wasn't poor. She managed to get an education, so she was an exception. Along with her being a commoner, Alistair knew it would be a good idea to have a wife with that status so better laws could be made. Amelia knew this as well. That morning, Amelia took her time to get ready for the day as she watched the sun turn the sky from black to shades of orange and red. This became part of her routine, and it was one of her favorite parts of the day. Now that Amelia was in the royal lifestyle, she had to adapt, which thankfully was not an issue for her. Once getting help putting on a dark blue dress with gold seams and a cream-tinted front, Amelia came out of the room. The servants with her went off to do their own duties for the day, and in place of someone to be with her was a giant of a knight. Now Amelia was already short herself, standing at a solid 5'2". This gargoyle soldier, he stood over at least 7 feet. "Good morning, Your Grace," the knight spoke in a deep, roaring voice. "Did you sleep well?" "Indeed I have, Amadel." Amadel was born and raised here in Raved, and albeit so was Amelia. But with him coming from a higher family than herself, the royal bloodline was all he had known, though he did not reveal how old he was. Amelia could tell by the tone and depth he was much older than her, maybe in his 50s or 60s. She was new to the castle and its residents, so there was no need to ask so many questions at once. Amelia needs to be patient. His Majesty is expecting your audience in the throne room as soon as possible. I will guide you. I would appreciate it. For the first part of the walk, the only thing breaking the silence were the faint squeaks of Amadel's armor and their footsteps. Amelia didn't mind it, though she did not mind not saying anything the whole way, so she decided to break the ice for conversation. "So, Amadel, there were some things I have been wondering about." "Ask away, Your Grace." She sighed under her breath. She was still going to have to get used to being called that. "Well, I want to start with getting to know you," Amelia began. "How long have you been living within the castle?" "My entire life was spent here, at least since I became orphaned at a young age. I came from a small village nearby, and let's just say a plague broke out and my mother and father didn't make it." "Oh goodness, I remember the Midnight Aid. My deepest condolences." "I've long since healed those scars. Your condolences are still appreciated." "So the late king took pity on you." "I was a young gargoyle with no home, and I hadn't eaten anything in days by the time I reached the castle doors. The horse had plenty, but he passed on due to exhaustion. I almost met the same fate if it weren't for King Ezra, one of the first humans to show me such kindness. His Majesty treats me the same, and with those two alone, they restored whatever faith I have left for humanity." "I am glad of that," said Amelia. "He has such a good heart indeed." The more Amelia thought about it, that was what got the woman to fall in love with the king. Unlike how Valentino has outbursts of anger, Amelia saw none of that from Alistair. At least he was careful about not showing any of it in front of her. Soon enough, the two reached the room doors. The gargoyle stood in front of Amelia and gave her a slight bow, with Amelia returning a close smile. "I hope we get to cross paths again, Your Grace," Amadel said. "There's other duties to attend to." "I say the same with you, Amadel." And with that, Amadel went down the hall and took a turn, the sound of his armor fainting away when Amelia took a deep breath. She was a bit tense, but she put it on as she was nervous. Gaining a moment of confidence, she opened the doors and shut them behind her. The room was large, with chests lying up the walls and thrones against the back wall. As she got closer, she could see that they were lined with black and purple cloth, with gold holding it all together. Alistair was already seated in his, and when the two made eye contact, they couldn't help but smile. He loved her as much as she loved him, and Amelia knew this. His eyes gave it all away. "You are as beautiful as the day we met," he said as she sat down on the throne next to him, taking her hand within his. "The country is going to love you." "I'm sure they will, my beloved," Amelia said, her smile still lingering. She felt safe the moment he took her hand, so this sort of helped confirm she made the right decision for a partner. When they were ready, Alistair stood from his throne, their hands still intertwined as they made their way down a few more halls. It had to take some time for the country to gather and watch Amelia's coronation, after all. The country needed a queen, and she was still wrapping her head about it being her. What really made Alistair make up his mind of rather having a commoner bride than a fellow royal? The two stood in front of doors that led to a small balcony facing the front, where millions of people were waiting to see who their new queen would be. Amelia was a little nervous, quietly taking deep breaths as someone behind her placed a crown on her head. A crown of amethyst and obsidian jewels, finished with gold. Alistair took notice of her nervousness, squeezing her hand gently. "It is going to be okay. This part will be over before you know it. I wasn't expecting this day to happen to me. It still feels like a dream." "Well, our dream is going to be a reality here in a minute," Alistair says. The woman looked over to Alistair, and seeing a reassuring smile helped her relax some. And the moment those doors opened, the Queen and King of Ravet stepped out with the cheers of the citizens down below. Seeing already the love the people have for her, that made her smile. She will make sure to be a good queen not only for them, but for her family as well. The wedding itself took place a couple days after the coronation, now making the two husband and wife. It was huge, with white and shades of blue and purple. Amelia's family got to sit near them as well at the royal table. The day was clear, the weather felt perfect, and the birds were singing for the knot to be tied. Everything was going smoothly, even as night fell. Whoever stayed from the wedding were now inside the castle, enjoying the nightly activities. The main room they were in was lit up by candlelight, both on the walls and some scattered about on a few tables. Banners were hanging on the walls with Alistair's family crest. Blue background with a white overlay, and on the white part was a black eagle with a small flower above the right wing. Chatter from the guests filled the remaining empty space, though all sounded like nonsense with all the conversations. Amelia and Alistair sat at the table, with Amelia sitting on her husband's right. She was taking in everything, taking in how her life has changed in just a few short days. It wasn't that she wasn't ready getting adjusted to a new life. It was how quickly she was thrown into it. Everyone expects their lives to stay the same until a big opportunity comes to them, and like a flip of a coin, they decide whether to make their lives better or worse. Always one decision away from changing the course of life. As quickly as she believed her life was going to be greater, tonight proved how some coins are unpredictable if handed by someone else. Amelia was taken away from her thoughts when the feast was served. Whole animals on silver platters. Bread, fruit, the 9 yards. It looked to be more food served than at the market, and this was the part Amelia already accepted. "Together, we'll make sure our reign is as peaceful as we plan it to," Alistair said to Amelia. He placed his hand over hers, causing her to look at him and smile. "I have no doubt about it." As the food was being delivered to the tables, everyone began quieting it down. Before long, the once loud room was now as quiet as it was as if it were empty. The guests turned their heads as Alistair stood up, a glass of wine held up in one hand as Amelia stood with him, her glass in hers. "The day has been a good one for not only myself getting married to the woman I'm glad to spend the rest of my life with, but to share this glorious moment with my people," Alistair began. "The first 5 years of my reign have been peaceful ones, and thanks to my father, he established some of the great things for this country I have the honor of continuing." Night came, and the banquet hall was full of torchlights and laughter of guests. It was a large room with many tables half of the width filled with nobles and other royals. For the most part, the celebration was going smoothly. Amelia and Alistair were seated at the front, observing everything. He must have been looking for someone hardworking. Maybe someone with a somewhat lower status that will help change people's lives for the better. That could have been why he stopped by every morning. The thought of her hard work paying off made Amelia smile to herself. Alistair looked over at her, joining her smile as he gently took her hand in his. His touch took her away from her trance, smiling more at the sight of her now husband. "This is the best blessing the gods could give us," said Amelia. "Couldn't ask for anything better," spoke Alistair, placing a soft kiss on the back of her hand. The gesture gave her butterflies, and her heart felt like it was beating out of her chest. But it was all in a good way. It was hours before people began filing out, and the king and queen were the last to leave after many farewells. All through the night, the guests were coming to Amelia to give their own admiration for what she already did for them prior to everything. He was right about something else. How the people would adore her. There were many whose faces she recognized, proud for her to be where she is. It was easing her anxieties of being queen. They took themselves to their chambers and locked the doors for their privacy. Their intimacy was quiet enough to not awaken everyone in the castle, and it was enough to put each other to sleep by the time half the night was over. Alistair held her close and kissed the top of her head softly before closing his eyes. She had long since closed hers, smiling as she tried to slumber. This peace wasn't going to last long for either one of them, with one's blood shed as the other's with tears. Barely an hour passed before the moment was disrupted by clanks and shouts going down the hall, telling someone to stop. They were just getting dressed when Amadale burst in without announcement. Thankfully, Amelia was able to cover herself with a blanket, and Alistair his trousers beforehand. "What is the meaning of this, Amadale?" Amelia demanded. "Someone snuck into the castle, Your Grace. You two need to get out of here." Alistair grabbed what he could, and with the sheet still covering her, Amadale hurried them out of the room and down the maze of halls. In the moment, Amelia thought her life was going to possibly end that night. With being a new queen, who would blame her? It wouldn't be the first time a royal in Revet was assassinated, so there were many people who could make the attempt. The three were running with the others in the castle, trying to hurry out and keep an eye out for anyone who didn't belong. Despite Amadale doing his best to have his eyes peeled above and below, even he could only hear the shot of an arrow and hear it going through flesh before seeing it had gone through Alistair's shoulder. He screamed and knelt down in pain. Amadale tried keeping Amelia near, yet she was free from his grasp and got down near her husband. "Amelia, you need to go with Amadale now." "I'm not leaving without you." There was another arrow shot towards them, but Alistair used some strength to create a force field to protect her. It luckily covered her in time to get the arrow to bounce off. Amelia had shielded herself upon hearing it, and when it did not, Amelia was taken aback by the sudden protection. Looking at it for a second, then at Alistair. She thought he was a regular human like his father. "Amadale, take her somewhere safe. This country still needs their queen." "Alistair, please." "Your Grace, there's no time." Amadale grabbed her arm and forced her to get back up. Amelia was now having tears streaming down her face as he pulled her away. She fought and demanded he let her go, but the guard said nothing and kept going with his tightly gripped charade. Amelia was looking back at Alistair, and he stayed put. He had an apologetic look, and she could see how much it hurt him to see her like this. It took a while for the other guards to comb through the entirety of the building, along with a few who perished in the crossfire. This included King Alistair, who was found with the first arrow in the shoulder, along with 2 more through the throat and 1 in the head. Seeing the sight made Amelia's grief worsen. She already refused to eat and bathe as she was worried about his safety. Now that she knows of his fate, it lasted for weeks even after the funeral. It took almost a whole year for the poor queen to stop wearing the all-black dresses. The people felt horrible for not only losing their great king, they gave their condolences to Amelia for as long as they could. Amelia set out those to hunt down the assassin, and many nights they came back empty-handed. She did have an idea of who could be responsible. Even the queen knew she couldn't do much without evidence. After sending out another group of bounty hunters and them coming back with nobody was when she decided to find another way to find him. At least Alistair isn't the only one who can do things with magic. After all, she now rules a country where magic is part of everyday life. And with maybe some help from another source, Amelia can then determine the one who carried it out. There could be a possibility that it could have been for her, and Alistair passed protecting her. To her, the reasonable choice was death. Paying life or a life. Amelia was already awake before the sun was coming up. She already got a few things as far as any paperwork for her advisors to sort through, as far as a couple of laws she wanted to pass. After dropping it off at Darlin's office, she went back into the room and got her cloak. She was a commoner her whole life, so she knew her way around, and it was going to be her first time going through it as a royal. She was nervous about it at first, but she collected herself and put her mind to who she was before, just in a higher position. She told Amadel where she was going and to make sure he stays back far enough to not get suspicious. Amelia didn't want to suspect it to be him, but after putting two and two together, along with how things went the year prior, she had to at least make an attempt at her theory. Hood up and a friendly face, the Queen left through one of the back doors and into the streets. They treated Alistair as a regular citizen, and her tensions eased when they were greeting her with the same. Or at least ignoring her while they lived their lives for the most part. On occasion, she would look over her shoulder, and Amadel would either be hiding behind a wall or blending in with whatever oblivious group he could get into. The ones he chose had fellow gargoyles, so he was doing what he was told. Getting to Valentino's house was easy for her, and looking back one more time to make eye contact with the guard, she signaled for him to stay put where he was, within a tall and wide hedge-like bush and his wings tucked in to be better hidden. She sighed and brought her hood down. She took a moment to look at the front door, feeling her anxieties rising in her chest as her heart began pounding. She shouldn't be this nervous despite the sour patch that was left from last time, but she's a different person now than she was before everything. Another deep breath, and Amelia knocked gently on the door. She stepped back and waited for a moment. She could breathe a sigh of relief upon seeing Agatha answer. The older woman was shocked to see her, but quickly gained back her composure. Your Grace, it's a surprise to see you here, Agatha stammered. I appreciate your respect. I am still the Amelia you know, the Queen chuckled. You're free to address me by name. Oh, of course. Agatha motioned for her to come in, and it was almost the same as she remembered. Amelia could feel how much the energy in the home had changed. She could have put a finger on it. She looked down the hall and noticed the door to Valentino's room was wide open, when it was always closed when he was home. Is Valentino running errands? He left one night and never returned. I found his door open, and no note left behind to tell of his whereabouts. It was not long after Alistair passed. I'm so sorry for your loss, Amelia. Amelia looked at the other woman when she brought up Alistair's name. Her heart stung a little, but she did not allow it to affect her posture. What Agatha said was beginning to connect the dots. He was raising suspicion for himself. Did you look around his room to see if there was anything missing? Not after that morning. I kept the door open so I could remind myself he's no longer here. You're free to look through to see if there is anything. Thank you, Agatha. You have always been kind to me, so I will guarantee you're protected if any evidence is found against Valentino. This is a hefty crime he got himself tied to. I'm hoping it isn't. I know his temper could get bad, yet it wouldn't come to mind for my boy to even do something like this. And honestly, Amelia was hoping it wasn't him either. But since she was already here, there's no turning back now. Not when there's an assassination to take care of. If she was right, then it wasn't the court Valentino would have to worry about. Amelia walked down the hall and stepped foot into his room. Dark blue walls. Full bed with green and white sheets, and bedding along with a clothing truck sitting at the foot of it. Black bookcase and desk. It looked like it hadn't been touched. He kept it the same when he was a teenager, and she chuckled to herself. It brought back memories of when things were simpler. Back when feelings and adult things didn't get in the way. She didn't get why she didn't see it sooner. She thought she did, but the last time she saw him proved her wrong. Amelia shook her head some and came back to reality. Reminiscing can come later. She looked around carefully, her heels making noise against the wooden floor. At first it looked normal. Everything was left as it was. She could even see dust. That's how untouched the room had been. Yeah, keywords at first. The more she stood there, now in the middle of the room, she could sense something faint. It was hard to see it, but it was in plain sight. Her gaze glazed over to the desk. and that spot was surprisingly neater. Amelia knew Agatha was telling the truth. The old woman had no reason to lie. If anything, she was the one who enforced her and Valentino to always tell the truth. The queen walked over to the desk to get a closer look at it. There wasn't anything she could see right away, until she set sights on something glistening in the corner of her left eye. Having grown up using some magic thanks to her grandmother, Amelia sensed some in what caught her attention. It was behind a stack of books if you looked straight ahead, so she grabbed it and took a closer look. It was a small, clear sphere that seemed normal at first glance. But she knew it was more than that. Amelia quickly put the sphere in her pouch when she heard footsteps getting closer. Agatha entered the doorframe and looked at the queen, giving her that motherly smile she always found comfort in. The room seems fine. Other than the clear orb, it wasn't a complete lie. The older woman let out a sigh of relief. Thank the heavens. You know I have no reason to wrong you. I know you wouldn't. Is there anything else I can get for you? Oh no, I wanted to see with my own eyes. Amelia smiled gently, and as if spoken with their eyes, the two women quickly closed the space with a tight embrace. It was a lot going on, and it was hitting them all at once. Not only did Amelia lose her husband, Agatha is in the process of losing her son. The queen didn't want to make her grieve more than surety is by how soon she heard the muffled sobs. I know Valentino is a good man, Amelia said. I believe he allowed his lust to drive him to these high risks. She wasn't expecting an answer right away. Why would she? I don't understand why the gods have to do this to us, Agatha said between sobs when she pulled away. What did we do wrong with you children? You raised us perfectly well. Not everyone's mindset is the same. Agatha took out one of her handkerchiefs and handed it to her. All I could do right now is pray you get whatever justice you can receive for Alistair. No man deserves his life cut short like that, Agatha spoke, wiping away her tears. The older woman attempted to give it back, but Amelia raised her hand as a silent keep it. The other nodded and put it in one of the pockets of her apron. I am doing whatever it takes. I love him just like everyone else. Didn't realize love was also a curse. The two said their goodbyes and Amelia made her way back to the castle. It was some good distance before Amabel caught up to Amelia. Find anything in there, Your Grace? Amelia took out the sphere from its place and held it up enough to show the gargoyle. My grandmother told me about these things while she worked in the council. Sometimes they're used to spy on people for adultery or murder. The young man is doing this to himself. She even said he left not long after the assassination. I couldn't think of anything he could have been involved in. She wanted him to be proven innocent. She really did. But the evidence was slowly becoming clear the more she investigated. The gods couldn't have pulled any other cards. And now she has to figure out the next step to find where he went. It was going to be a bit difficult, but not when it comes to being in Raved, where there are some advantages for her. In between royal duties, Amelia was in one of the rooms full of herbs, and her notes spread about on one of the tables. She had been at it for hours now, but couldn't understand how the sphere ended up in the home. Surely Valentino knew something was planning this. Now that it has been a while since he was at home, there was a possibility he could have left the country by now. He'll have to change his identity in order to escape her. But she's smarter than that, and knows her way with anything else like him. The sphere was resting on a miniature stand meant to hold that sort of thing. She wanted him to see she was onto him. Valentino either didn't remember, or simply didn't know, not only for her family's previous court involvement. At least on her father's side, she was proficient in doing said magic. Since her father wasn't as lucky to possess the ability, she learned everything from her grandmother. Amelia was too focused on what she was doing to notice the door opening. A knock was what made the queen jump in her place and turn around. She was thankful she didn't already have anything in her hands to drop. Once her eyes saw it was Amadel, she sighed in relief. Is there anything you need, Amadel? It's getting late, Your Grace. There are events you need to plan early in the morning. Let me wrap this up, then I will go to my chambers. I may be onto something here. Curiosity got the better of the guard and he entered, closing the door behind him. He looked and made his way to the table with the notes. It was almost full across the surface, with some pages having more scribbles than others. He was looking at the sphere when Amelia came next to him with a jar. Wherever he is now, he has to be sent back. He can't hide from the law forever. Have you already sent troops to search for him? I don't need to worry about that just yet. Amelia went past him into another table with a small flamelet and a bowl over it. She set the jar down and went to work. Amadeo came over to see what she was doing, and then something drastic happened. The cauldron her grace was tending to went from the dark color he saw to a bright blue the moment he set his eyes on it. It took Amelia by surprise as well before switching to happiness. At least she got what she's looking for. Amadeo, come closer, Amelia waved. He's been here this whole time. Hearing that intrigued the gargoyle. He came just a few inches behind her and looked down. In the middle of the light blue was a white circle, and on top of that, it showed Valentino sitting back in one of those narrow alleyways. His legs crossed, and the back of his head resting against the brick wall. His hair was up in a messy bun, and his face was covered. But Amelia knew that narrow face. Which way was that? I think it's close to his house. He's an idiot for staying. Amelia came back to Agatha's home with a few guards. The guards left to go find Valentino when the queen signaled. She was going to deal with Agatha. Did she know he was close? Why would she do that? She needed answers, and she's going to get them from the source. Amelia came to the door with now a single guard. A young man with dark hair to his shoulders and his eyes as green as the pine trees. He hasn't been a guard long, yet he has proven his potential already, so Amelia trusted him to be with her. She took a deep breath and knocked on the door, waiting for Agatha to answer. Amelia had her hands in front of her, her face a mixture of sadness and anger. Your Majesty, are you all right? Yes, so many thoughts going through my head. Are you happy you know where he's at now? I am, Ignal. I wasn't expecting to find out this way. Valentina will be dealt with accordingly. Before another word could be spoken, footsteps could be heard on the other side coming closer. A moment later, locks were unlocked and Agatha came to view once the door opened. Amelia, what are you doing here? I assumed you had everything you needed. I assumed so as well. I found Valentino in one of the alleyways nearby. You did? How close? Too close for comfort. Did you know he was here the entire time? Amelia was giving her this only chance to be honest with her, or she could have her arrested as well for involvement. Agatha sighed, tears beginning to welt in her eyes. Her Majesty studied her for a moment, and she could see that the elderly woman was being genuine. Her anger turned to pity, relieved that there will be one less arrest. I don't understand why he couldn't see me. I never heard anything out of the ordinary at night. May we come inside and look in his room, Agatha? Asked Amelia. The woman nodded and stepped aside for them. Amelia and Ignal gave her a slight nod as they stepped in. The two went straight to Valentino's room, and Amelia looked around. The bed was still untouched, and the desk had not been used. Some dust had been moved, and Amelia thought it was from the last time she was there. And there was something else that hadn't been there last time either. Your Majesty, how long has that drawer been open? Amelia looked to see where he was talking about. Her eyes laid on the dresser, and the top two drawers were open ajar. The last time she was in here, they were both closed. Valentino must have been able to make portals and use that so he's not waking up Agatha. He had to have been here recently. Let's see if the other guards found him yet. Yes, Your Majesty. Ignal followed close behind when Amelia left the room. Agatha was in the kitchen nearby by the time they were heading out, and she came around before they made it to the door. Did you find anything? He was here not too long ago. He must have used portals to get in as he pleased. Yells cut off the queen, and the three quickly went out the door. Amelia was the first to get through, and when trying to look for where it came from, she heard it coming from where there were a few alleyways that intertwined further out. Some civilians were crowded at one of the entries, so the trio made their way over to see what was going on. Most of the guards she brought with her were in a pile of death with blood splattered on the brick walls. Even a head or two were missing, assumed to have combusted with how unclean the stumps appeared. Amelia looked up and noticed a single guard pressing his back against the furthest wall of the path. Not caring if the red liquid stained her dress, Her Majesty made her way over to him and knelt down in front of him. It took the man a moment to recognize her there, slowly looking up with a look of fright plastered across his face. "Who is responsible for this?" she asked. It was that man. The one with the bun and the long face. I thought we had him, but he fought like he was taking down an army." Amelia sighed and did not let her anger show on her face. She stood up and went back to Ignal and Agatha. "Your Majesty, we can't let him escape the country." "Oh, he won't." Valentino breathed heavily as he managed to teleport closer to the border. He hid in another alleyway, this one much longer and darker than the last. He didn't have that much time now that Amelia was on his ass. Assassinations meant the death penalty at the hands of the royals, not going to the forest, and he knew that. He wasn't sure whether to convince her to let him be a king consort now that she is queen. The man was still content to win her heart now that the competition was out of the way. Now that he's got her attention, he can have her at last. At least he hoped so. He heard guards coming his way, and the alley he appeared in was darker and longer, so he was quick to flee into the darkness ahead. Valentino had decent enough vision in the dark, so he can make his way around. As his jogs were faster than regular, the footsteps of the guards were soon to fade away. Not safe yet, oh no. He has a statute of limitations to beat, if there was one. This alleyway was longer than he anticipated, but if it's going to help him get out of this mess, then so be it. Amelia will send people after him when he enters another country. Valentino believes he's closer to Lazaretto from the few city buildings he saw. If he manages to cross, he will be in the city part of that country. He's down here. Shit. Valentino ran faster. After some random turns, he came to a dead end. He attempted to make another portal to leave, but a pair of cuffs came on when he was forced to turn around. Ignal roughly grabbed an arm and dragged him out of the alleyway. For how far they were, it took them a minute to reach the clearing once again. The young guard pushed him enough for Valentino to move forward and on his knees, the cuffs keeping his hands in front of him. The kind of cuffs on Valentino were the kind that restricts magic use, so he was useless if he wanted to escape. It took Valentino a minute before looking up, meeting the gaze of the Queen of Waravet. "It's about time we caught up to you," said Amelia. "Good to see the face of my husband's killer. You won't do anything to me. We grew up together. That won't matter in the eyes of the gods and I. Not when the safety of my country is at risk." Seeing how serious the Queen is, Valentino's face turned whiter than it already was. The reality of it all was now getting through his deranged mind. And when Amelia said that something will be done, she stuck to it and had her final say. In this case, in the back of her mind, she smiled for what she had in store. The dungeon was cold and damp, even more so with the winter creeping in. Valentino was hanging on one of the walls by chains, wearing nothing except for a cloth around his area. The man had been shivering for hours, starved ever since his arrival. If Amelia was planning to drive him insane, then she is going to have to try harder. For now, all Valentino can do is be there in silence and have his head down. He lifted his head slightly upon hearing footsteps. He kept his gaze on the floor even when the footsteps entered the room. The footsteps stopped for a moment at the doorway. There were 2 sets, and as soon as they stopped, only one pair continued their way to the assassin. Valentino's eyes saw a dress, causing him to look up for the first time in who knows how long. Instead of Amelia like he assumed, there was a young woman in front of him, her dark hair braided behind her, and bright eyes focused on him. The eye contact felt like minutes that dragged on forever. The young woman studying him in silence. "Tell me, Eliza," began Amelia, "what would you consider a good punishment for this man? The assassin who killed our king." Valentino chuckled at Amelia calling him that. It sounded like the funniest thing in the world. Supposedly wasn't expecting to be called that by someone he considered a friend. "A big decision for such a little girl to handle," said Valentino, his voice raspy for not speaking for a while. The young lady chuckled. "Oh, I'm not the one to carry it out. I help with the deciding factor for how to do it," Eliza told him. And for you? A golden drink in the stomach of a beast, covered in honey and insects. I know someone who has built up quite the appetite. Do you know who I'm speaking of, Your Grace? Oh, I do. Andu Fromage will be looking forward to this. Does he prefer his meat to be raw or cooked? I can't remember. I don't believe he cares as long as he has his fill. There's some gold melting as we speak, so we could fetch him when it's ready. Maybe Andu Fromage can understand being patient for a little while longer. It was thought he was going to laugh at his sentencing, showing no remorse. The fear in his eyes when he heard the name made the man shake more, in addition to the freezing temperatures dropping. Seeing his reaction was enough to get the queen to smile a bit. Valentino moved his gaze over to Amelia, his eyes now showing a bit of pleading. Amelia, please. I'm not going to die at his hands. The oracle has spoken, Valentino. Perhaps you should have learned how to control your thoughts before acting them out. These are the consequences to your actions. I think it could be a good sight to see for the people. Do you believe so, Your Grace? Oh, what an excellent idea.